Okay, this is on, right? Okay, good morning to everyone. I just want to take 1 minute to just to leave the space to the real stars here today. I just want to thank Natasha, Zach, and Amit for being here. I mean, Zachary already told the joke on Friday. You already spoiled this, but okay, just the ones that didn't heard. We met at WACSB in a conference in Washington last October, and I mean, I was completely overwhelmed about all the things that we can do with AI, and I was crushed by all the things that we weren't doing yet. So we decided that it was a very good opportunity to have you here, and also believing that this accreditation with WACSB for us is like a journey. This is a part of a journey, and it's being really something that we are taking a lot of, making a lot of steps and taking a lot of message home and understanding what we need to change, and it's been a wonderful journey. We hope we get accredited next year, but this is part of all this process. So again, thank you for being here, and I leave the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Miguel. We'll do quick introductions, and then we can start with the content. So first of all, thank you for being here today. We are excited to share a few ideas that hopefully will be helpful for you. I'm Amit Deokar. I'm Associate Dean at the Manning School of Business at UMass Lowell. I'm also Associate Professor of MIS, and so happy to be sharing a few ideas with you.
Great. My name is Natasha Veltri. I'm from the University of Tampa in Tampa, Florida, and I'm a Professor of Information and Technology Management there. Our school has about 11,000 students total, and about 5,000 of them in the business school. The business school is AACSB accredited, and that's how I met my colleagues, Amit and Zach. And I also have served as an associate dean for the College of Business for 8 years, and this is my first year back as a faculty member, away from the administration, back into the classroom.
Good morning to all. Thanks again for being here in person, but also I understand we have some folks online, and so we're very grateful whether you're here or anywhere else for listening in and being part of this conversation. It's one that we're all very passionate about, and I think one that we all care very deeply about. And so my name is Zach Goldman. I am at the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky, associate professor there in the Management and Entrepreneurship Department. I am the director of our online programs, and so there's a lot of things that we deal with on a regular basis with AI that I'll touch on. But really at the heart of my work is teaching and learning, and so I'll be leading some of the conversation. In the second half of the panel, we'll talk about kind of where we're going with this, but research and teaching both will be a focal point of today's panel, and we're really excited to jump into those topics with with all of you.
Great, thank you so much, Zach and Natasha. So let's go ahead and get started, right? So the plan for today is maybe spend about first half on discussing some tools for research, and then transitioning to teaching, and then seeing how we can use these tools in teaching and learning as well. So we'll entertain questions, and based on how you feel in terms of the different questions, we can pace it a little bit differently as well, but that's the plan.
If I can add one thing too, we would love for this to be interactive. We do have activities planned throughout this session, so if you have devices, your laptops and other things to interact with this session, we'll be prompting you to use those here throughout the session, so we'll get into that shortly.
Yeah, so get ready. All right, so let's talk a little bit about research, right? I mean, all of us care about research and being productive in it, and as you know, we all have different goals in terms of producing research, whether it's dissertations, thesis, if you're students, or if you are academics, publishing in conferences and journals. And certainly doing high quality work is our aim to do so, right, and making contributions to the work. But generally, like when we think about research as a process, the question we ask is, how do we streamline this process, right? How can we remove any barriers? Can we outsource some of the labor-intensive tasks? Can we create more time for idea development, theory building, knowledge creation, which is really at the crux of research. And so trying to remove some of the friction in the process is what we are aiming to do with when we think of these tools, right? And we have evolved as researchers over time as well, right? So we don't no longer usually go to libraries, physical libraries up the stairs and all of that. So majority of the time when we want to seek out information, we do that digitally. And whether even as far as citations, gone are the days when we don't type these citations by hand, right? So if you recall, for those of us who are a little of the previous generation, so to speak, we've seen citations being typed by hand, but then transitioned to tools like EndNote, Mendeley, Zotero, just to name a few, which allow us to speed up things, right? Speed up citations, bibliography, so that we can spend again the time on the research tasks that we deeply care about. So having said that, I think coming to sort of generative AI, we all know that around about 3-4 years back, November 2022, that's when ChatGPT came on the horizon. It was one of the fastest. It is the fastest tool that have seen adoption of over 100 million users in less than 2 months. I mean, this has been groundbreaking simply because of that adoption rate. And now if we start taking a look at some of these platforms that are out there, there is platforms like ChatGPT, of course, but then there are other tools like Google's Gemini, there's Perplexity, there is Cloud, and so all of these tools have a lot of potential, and as you can see on this screen here, they are valued at more than several million, some even billion and trillion dollars as well. So these are some of the tools that you will see making the list of the top performers, right? So I mean, there's this competition between these tools as to which of these tools are the top performers in tackling the complex problems, right? So every day, every week, this list gets updated based on what is happening in the Gen AI world. So this is just a glimpse at what may be the top performers right now. And so really when it comes down to us as users, it's all about using these tools and making sure that we use one of the top ones. It really doesn't have to be the top one, but any of these tools here are going to be just as efficient for us. And we brought this question up on Friday as well, right? So where is the instruction manual for all of these tools, right? So we see a lot of development happening, but we are all sort of in this boat together, trying to figure out how do we actually make use of these tools to streamline some of the processes, remove some of the friction in our research processes, and that's what we want to get into next. So as far as generative AI in academia, right? So when we look at where are we as researchers in that, researchers, teachers, etc. So when Gen AI tools like ChatGPT came around, as you would expect with any new change, there is always a resistance, always panic, always hysteria. And so the initial reaction was, no, we cannot be using this. This is not something we are doing. Research is not, we cannot use this, right? So initial reaction was obviously to say no to whatever next was on the horizon, but also to ban in terms of using these for conferences, journals, you name it. But over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, we've seen this changing, this sort of gradual acceptance into certain areas of the process. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that. But also a lot of professional organizations are now coming up with new policies, new guardrails as to see how we can use these tools responsibly. And so just to give you a flavor of what is happening in terms of policy. So this is from the operations management field, but if you pick any field like marketing, finance, similar things are happening. So from the operations management supply chain field, these are some of the top journals in the area: Journal of Operations Management, Production and Operations Management, Decision Science Journal. These editors of these journals came together to say, okay, what can we use AI for? What can we not or should not be using? And I'm sure this is going to be evolving over the next period of time, but this is where it stands right now. And so first and foremost, I mean, you can read the details in there, but I think the principles that are being discussed there is, first and foremost, we should be disclosing and documenting the use of AI. How are we using it? What are we using it for? Whether it's copy editing, whether it's literature search, what are we using it for? We need to disclose. And the primary reason behind this is to remove the secrecy behind it, bring in transparency. The more people are open and clear about what they are using it for, the more people will understand the use of it for their own processes, but also really understand the research paper in that context. Okay, they use this tool to help speed up the process in terms of literature review. That's great, but we know that, so, and that's something to be aware, good to know. And so then we need to justify the use of AI. Why are we using it? Maybe to improve the copy editing process, maybe to make sure that we are capturing the literature comprehensively. So essentially we need to say why we are using it as well. And most importantly, verifying and taking responsibility of the AI output, right? So as you know, these tools can produce a lot of text. While it's been improving over the years, where what we call hallucination, or the ability to sort of make up new text or fictitious text, let's put it that way, has gone down. It's not completely accurate, and it doesn't understand the nuances that you and I would know about our own research questions, which means that we should be the ones who are actually taking responsibility of this output and really driving the game. So in other words, AI should not be a co-author on your paper. That's the bottom line, what these journals are telling you. There's also a similar position from the Committee on Publication Ethics, which is here, I think, based off of in UK. And so it's very relevant to all of the European schools. And I think we use here in the US, draw a lot of inspiration from that as well. But they are basically saying the same idea. AI should not be a co-author. You should take responsibility. You should disclose. You should justify the use of it. And lastly, they're talking about not using AI for any sort of manipulation of data, manipulation of figures, which to me, it seems pretty obvious whether it's AI or not. We shouldn't be really have to sort of bring this up. But apparently, they're doing due diligence to sort of make sure that, okay, well, of course, we should not be using AI for any sort of malicious use in terms of manipulating research data or images, etc. Any questions so far? Let me take a pause here. Yeah. Okay. All right. So then we've said in these policies what is it that we can't use research for, or what we should not be. But they also specify what AI can be used for, right? And so here are some of the areas that they have mentioned what AI could be used for: language improvement, literature classification, data collection, but not to generate synthetic data is what they specify, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But also coding assistant, writing code for analysis. So these are some of the areas that we could be using AI tools for. Actually, I don't fully agree on the data collection, because some of the methods, like I'll give you an example, a simulation, for example, is inherently based on synthetic data, where we simulate the data based on certain distributions, etc. And so perhaps this will evolve over time where AI could be used for that. But at least as of right now, these group of editors are saying do not use AI for data collection or generating synthetic data. So that brings to our next sort of important point is, what can we do this with AI tools to inform, to speed up, to remove the friction in our research processes, right? So it's all about rethinking the workflow, the system that each of us have. How I do a literature search might be different than how you do it, or how I come up with a theory question or theory framework might be different than you. So whatever is our own system, own workflow, I think our goal should be to infuse AI tools at specific places so that it speeds up that process. And so think about this this way, like you are the project manager for your research project. You are delegating any sort of labor-intensive tasks to AI so that, again, you can be more efficient. You can use AI tools to create outlines, structures, drafts. but at the same time have a lot of skepticism in terms of what it's generating, thinking about it like an eager undergraduate student who wants to give an answer immediately for any question that comes up. But then sort of thinking, okay, well, let's step back. Here's what you're telling me, but let's think deeply about it, or what you're telling may not be exactly accurate. It's on the right track, but may not be exact. So taking that sort of skeptical approach to responses and realizing that AI cannot be serving, or it just doesn't have the ability to serve as a research manager in the sense of it's not going to keep track of your bibliography. You have tools for that. Like we said, EndNote, Zotero, Mendeley are typical tools used for that. It's also cannot write creatively or search creatively for you. And it cannot fully direct itself. So those are some of the caveats to keep in mind generally when you think about this toolkit. And so just to sort of summarize, you are in the driver's seat. You are the one who is managing the project and the process. The goal is to delegate labor-intensive tasks and use AI as a research assistant. Be skeptical about what it's producing. And we talked about what it cannot do in terms of being a research manager, etc. Now, let's see some of the key areas where AI could be used effectively in the research process. And so here are 5 different areas that, there is a lot of potential where AI could be used. And we are going to spend some time especially talking about the top 3 ones, which is the semantic literature search, literature mapping, scanning, reading literature, data analysis, and we'll touch a little bit on data analysis and writing and editing. So let's get into the first one. So when we typically search literature, right? So what's our go-to tool? Typically what? Anybody here? Where do you start? If you were to... Google Scholar, perfect, yeah. Google Scholar is what we often is our go-to tool before the days of Gen AI. And that's usually based on keyword, right? So you have some keywords around your research question, you search for it, and then it produces a list of papers, which is great. That's definitely better than just hunting down the shelves in the library and poring over the journals, etc. But we can do better. With these tools, we can do what is called as a semantic literature search. What it means is that even if you don't have the exact keywords, based on the context, based on your research question, the tools are going to be able to figure out what may be relevant papers to your research question, right? So that is one way of sort of looking at this literature, semantic literature search idea. And then the other thing is semantic literature search can also be used to make sure that we are not necessarily getting hung up with this keyword-based approach, right? So there might be other things other papers that we may have omitted by accident, and so we want to make sure that we cover it. So let's take a quick sort of look at some of the tools. Now, you might be wondering, why do I have ChatGPT there? And the question might be because it hallucinates, right? It produces incorrect responses sometimes. And so the reason I have it here is because we need to be creative on how we use these tools so that we are not maybe using ChatGPT to generate the literature search for us, but using it as a way to get some of the phrases or some of the questions that could inform our search using other tools. So going back to my point, it's about combining these tools effectively. It's not just using one tool and expecting here's the input and here's the output and then go from there. So we are going to use ChatGPT in a way that does not necessarily give you the literature search because it could be incorrect in some cases, but to create these questions that would then be fed into a tool called Elicit. I believe all of you have here access to Elicit as in terms of licenses. So, but even if you don't, there's a free version that can be pretty effective as well. So let me show you a quick video. This video is just going to show you. I put in ChatGPT where I said, I want to write a literature search on crowdfunding. Okay, so, and it's generating all this sort of outline for it. And the idea behind this is to create areas within literature search that could help me figure out what should I do. So that I picked up the theoretical frameworks, which is often a big piece, go into 𝗪𝗁𝗁 and then put that in. And now I see that 𝗪𝗁𝗁 is giving me a list of papers, list of articles that are relevant to that particular, like the theory frameworks in this case. Right? So I did not search that in ChatGPT, I'm searching that in 𝗪𝗁𝗁. And now 𝗪𝗁𝗁 is able to compare these papers on whether it's a research gaps or research questions or research methods. So you could be using this tool to speed up that process, so that now, okay, well, you have this set of papers that you could be looking at more closely. You could also be then filtering. You could then use filtering like, say, I want to look only the past 3 years, or you want to look at maybe the high quality journals, Q1 and Q2 only, which is the journals that are most the top tier. Or you could look at keywords from here. Like you could say, I want papers only that you have crowdfunding in that abstract. So this filtering approach can also help you then sort of get to the pieces of literature, right? So then hopefully this video gives you a flavor for what 𝗪𝗁𝗁 and ChatGPT together could do as a toolkit. And then finally, you could export this set of papers into a bibliography, like a .bib file, which you can import in Zotero, EndNote, or whatever tool you are using. So again, reference manager has its place, and you go there and save it. You could even use Scholar at that point to pull up the actual paper, right? If you're connected to your library, you could be pulling up a PDF from there. So you started from a research question or the outline from ChatGPT, picked up a part of it, went to 𝗪𝗁𝗁, got a list of papers, compared and scanned through them quickly, and then exported them to a bib file, right? So that's what we did in this video. So now I think I want to challenge you to just roll up your sleeves, and so then let's see what else can we do with these tools, right? So I would like you to actually do this activity on your own. So I think Natasha and I can help you walk through this activity. And so the activity is first to go to ChatGPT and enter this prompt, and then take what you get from the prompt and go on to 𝗪𝗁𝗁 and enter one of these questions. So we'll give a quick 10-minute for working on this activity. We'll try to be as interactive. We'll maybe walk around and see if you need any help. For those of you who are online, hopefully these prompts are detailed enough. I don't know if we have opportunity for asking questions, but we would love to if there is. But yeah, so let's.
We would love to connect this from using ChatGPT to generate research questions, right? So if you have a general theme that you're maybe researching in, or pick a new topic, and use the prompt that's suggested on the slide here. And then once you're going to have a long list of possible research questions. You have to scan through them to identify the one that you want to then take into 𝗪𝗁𝗁. And from what we understand, you already have subscription to 𝗪𝗁𝗁, or you can sign up for a free account if you don't yet have a subscription. It does allow you to do several searches a month within your subscription period for free. And so in there, then you can either copy and paste the research question, or 𝗪𝗁𝗁 also has capability to help you edit your research question. Right. So it has the generative AI capabilities. It will help you rephrase or rewrite, make it more specific. And then from there,
we'll go into the next steps. We will take this information and do another activity following this. So this could be the first step.
Yeah, let's do this first step right now.
Yeah. Just walk around to see if you need any help.
So as my colleagues, walk around and certainly raise your hand if there's any, if you've never used some of these tools before, or if you've never used them in this way, and they can certainly provide some more one-on-one guidance. I'll share just some brief remarks while they're doing that on this very topic, because I think Natasha mentioned something really important there. We think about research from a variety of lenses, but one of the things that I think we should be considering is, are we exploring, something that is new to us, or that is new to the general pursuit of knowledge and the academic inquiry? And so the good news there is that you can use either approach, right? If you're familiar with the subject matter, then this should hopefully align with what you already know and advance that knowledge even further. But if you're wanting to maybe start a new line of research, or if you're new to academia, this is a great way to get started in knowing and learning about your particular field of study. So just some things to think about there as you get started. And again, if you need any help or assistance, just raise your hand and our colleagues can come by and help you out in any way that we can. And again, folks online, we do not have an ability to see you, but I hope that you're also able to follow along with this. And again, the prompts there on the screen are just as applicable to you wherever you may be as they are to the folks here in the room. Sure. So we've just been made aware that for those online that you may not be able to see the slides. One, our apologies for that. But two, those are being uploaded here as we speak into the chat. So just hold tight. If they're not there yet, they'll be there shortly, and then you'll be able to click on that. And we are on, once you get to those slides, we're on the slide titled Activity 1. Once you get in there, you'll be able to catch up and see where we're at. And again, our apologies for that technical issue, but we'll get that resolved here shortly, and you should get that that link or that access here anytime. Mm-hmm. Remove it. Yeah, we're going to take just another few minutes here to keep working on this activity while we also...
Just raise your hand. Happy to just come in and take a look. Just to kind of clarify, so what you get from ChatGPT, pick one of the questions that you get back from ChatGPT and go into elicit and paste it. Obviously, you have to reiterate this process over time to find address all of the questions, but do it for one of them as an activity for right now.
Obviously, here on the slide, we also have a well-formed question, but we may re-prompt it a few times to get a satisfactory list of possible research topics, as you know.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Again, if this is your first time using these tools in this way, it may take a little while to get comfortable with this process. We see a lot of good conversation happening here in the room, and I hope folks online, if you're not already, you can soon get access to the slides, and you'll be able to have a similar experience wherever you may be as well.
So we'll give you a couple more minutes, and then we can move on to the next piece. Just a show of hands, how many of you are able to complete or get to the activity? How many were able to finish it?
I think I'm seeing a lot of ChatGPT screens, but not very many illicit screens yet. So I think we still get maybe
We'll give you a couple more minutes, sure.
a little bit more. I see the illicit screens here.
Miguel, do we know, did the chat go through? Miguel, we know, did the chat go through? They have link now?
Sure. So again, folks online in particular, you should now have access to these slides for yourself, and you can go in and look at Activity 1. That's where we're at. Again, those online who can't see where we're at, we're still on Activity 1, and you, if you're wanting to follow along with us, we encourage that, of course. We're going to take another minute or two here to finish up Activity 1 before we move forward, and we'll be using these outputs in this work here in just a moment. So we encourage you to follow along with that and complete it to the best of your ability while we're doing so here in the room as well.
I'm hearing some conversations, which is great. Just want to check, do you guys, how many of you feel we should be moving on? Do you think we should be moving on to the next step? Okay.
Guiding the online students here.
I mean, that's what my default is. I think about the online students a lot, or the online participants. That's my core responsibility at U of L, and so anytime I know that there's an online audience, they can hear it. There's nothing I'm saying that they can't hear.
I think we should move on.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. So let's move on to the next step. Hopefully, the instructions are clear enough that you can go from ChatGPT to elicit. But if not, we are happy to share these instructions with you later as well.
Yes. And I think with elicit, as you're looking at the output, obviously in research we have this concept of seminal papers, right? So are these papers that are the key papers on this topic? Maybe not necessarily, but I think we're going to go to some of the other tools that we will show you today that will help us identify those critical papers.
Excellent point, Natasha. Yep, great. So now that we've sort of looked at semantic literature search, there are some other tools as well. So we looked at elicit, but there are some other tools like consensus, undermine. For the interest of time, we won't get into all of these here today because I also don't want to overwhelm all of you here. But we have a couple of screenshots, right? So consensus would be a great tool if you had a question where you want to see if there is generally agreement or disagreement in the field about it, right? And then it gives you papers as well. So kind of like 𝗪𝗪𝗪, just a different flavor of it. So this is another tool for doing this similar work. Undermined is also another tool similar to 𝗪𝗪𝗪, where you can ask questions and then get a detailed summary. It also gives you a timeline on when these papers were published. So just another variation on that. So next our phase is literature mapping. Why are we doing this? Because as Natasha was saying, as we look for a particular aspect of our research question, we get maybe 5-10 papers or so. Now these papers are good, but they may not be seminal papers. They may not be the papers that you want to spend a lot of time reading on, but they may be related to what you're doing, but not necessarily the best papers or exactly what you're looking for. So our goal is to actually figure out what else is out there, what are related papers to what you've found already. And that's where literature mapping comes in, is to expand what you have and figure out what are relevant papers out there. And so there are a few tools out there. So there's ones that I'm going to show today is litmaps and connected papers. But then we'll actually do an activity with yet another tool called Research Rabbit. So just to give you a different flavor there. So let's look at a quick video on litmaps and connected papers. So this is a tool where you bring in the papers that you just exported from 𝗪𝗪𝗪, right? So I'm bringing in the papers from what I had from 𝗪𝗪𝗪, and what it's doing is actually showing you what are the papers that are related to those, right? So you can sort these based on something called momentum, meaning kind of relevant papers, but also recent papers. So the ones that are in the dark are the ones that are already in the collection. The ones that are, the other circles are the ones that are not in the collection. It's finding those new papers. You can look at the authorship connections as well. So the idea is that you can take these papers, expand the search, and then export these articles into a new expanded bibliography. Take one of them, go to connected papers, and now this tool here is specifically good when you are interested in what are called as prior works and derivative works, meaning what came before, what came after, right? So in Scholar, we look at references and citations. That's exactly what this is doing in a visual way. For any given paper, you can look at prior and derivative works in a snapshot. So this allows you to do that very quickly. Again, our goal here with this activity is to expand what we had into what may be relevant to the research question that you are looking at. So as you can see there, there is a network between the derivative works. We can look at them, what's recent. And then finally, we could export this, right? So we can download this into a bib file again. So instead of now just having 10 papers, we probably have 100 papers. And probably you're wondering how we can read all of these, which is our next step. But before that, let's delve into actually trying this out, right? So there is a similar tool out there called Research Rabbit. So we'll have you sign in, create a new collection, which is there is actually create a new collection icon there, and you can add 1 or 2 articles that you got from 𝗪𝗪𝗪. Or in this case, if you haven't finished 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪, what you could do is you can pick any of the articles that might be relevant that you know for your research topic. Just use one or two articles that you know of specifically. If you finish the 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 activity, use the ones from 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪. If you did not, pick any of the articles that you know of. And then click on Explore Similar Work. You'll find interesting articles that are related to it, which is the purpose, and export them in bib. Then to explore the second tool, which is Connected Papers, again, create an account, sign in, take that key article, put it in Connected Paper, see what are the prior and derivative works. The goal of this activity is to allow you to sort of explore these tools so that later on when you are actually doing research on your own time, you can spend a lot more time on these.
Yeah. And I think with Research Rabbit, you don't have to create an account. It will allow you to start creating your collection right away.
Yep.
Without having to create the account. I think that will make it a little easier for us given our limited time, but we'll do about 10-15 minutes again.
Yep. Yeah, and so the purpose, you may be wondering, are these paid, etc. So each of these tools typically have a paid account, but for the free version, they have some limited access. Usually these accounts run up to like $10 per month, almost like ChatGPT. So I wouldn't subscribe to all of them. You would explore and experiment and see which one you like, right? So maybe based on where you are on the research phase, subscribe to 2 or 3 of these, and that's what you use for now.
Again, just for our folks online, we're now on the Activity 2 slide. So you'll see that titled at the top because you're navigating your own slides online. That's where we're at. To do this or to get the ideal output of this, you will need to have completed Activity 1 as well. So again, if you're online, we realized there was a bit of a technical delay there in terms of your access to the slides, but you should now be able to see these. And we are on Activity 2, and we'll spend the next 10 or 15 minutes going through that. That's a great point just brought up here in the room. If you haven't done Activity 1 and you want to kind of skip ahead, you can pick an article or an area topic that you're interested in and know about already. That's something that you could certainly kind of bypass Activity 1 for the sake of time.
We have a question here from one of the online participants, and it says, I have a question. When we use Prisma protocol to semantic reviews, we need to go to a specific databases, Scopus, Embase, etc. In this case, should I create my own database in BibTeX?
So BibTeX is typically used to collect a lot of citations or references, which I think is still very relevant. But what we are trying to show here with the activity is that you can use one of these tools to get a collection by using semantic search, right? So you are simply phrasing the question, and the tool is providing you with a list of articles that are relevant, which you can then export to BibTeX, correct? And same thing with the activity 2, whether you are using Research Rabbit or Litmaps or connected papers, you can look for similar work, expand it, and then export this as a BibTeX format. So again, the research manager is very important. It doesn't replace, it's not replaced by the AI tools, but you can use them in conjunction very well. If you are done with the Research Rabbit as an experiment, go to connected papers, see if you can find prior and derivative words. And if you don't know which paper to look at, maybe pick a paper from your own research that is relevant. I mean, idea is to explore these tools right now.
Again, folks online, if you didn't hear that, we're wanting you to certainly experience both if you are able to, Research Rabbit and connected papers. We realize, obviously, we're somewhat limited on time this morning, and so even if you get to experience one for the first time, that's something that you can build off of, and of course, you can use the other tool or explore them as well at a later point. judging purely on the faces here in the room and the looks that people are giving their screens, it looks like a lot of newcomers to these tools, which is exciting and always a fun part of the research process is learning new things yourself, right? Learning new tools, new ways to conduct research. That's always a big part of why we do this, right? And so if you are familiar with these tools already, or at least heard of them, then you can start to refine your skills during this session or during this activity. But based on what I'm seeing, at least here in the room, a lot of folks are exploring these tools for the first time, which is really, really interesting.
Couple more minutes to maybe either finish both the tools or at least one of the tools. If you get 30-40% to finish, I think that's a value. Trying it, yeah.
Experimenting.
Yeah. Takes a while.
Anytime you experiment, it does. You know, that's why these activities, I always just think about them as we're trying to introduce them. You know, we can't walk them through the entirety, but
Yeah.
we can expose them to new ways of conducting research and new tools that can help them, you know, do the research they're already doing. I think that's absolutely a win and something that adds benefit.
Yeah.
And like I said, as far as overall time goes, I mean, this be a perfect to get this building. I think goes into 11:10 or whatever, and I think
Yeah.
we're still good on time.
Yeah, for activity 3, we can simply demo at least the notebook and piece of it and show. Anybody has questions, just raise your hand. I'm happy to walk there.
Natasha, I think we had a question in the back row too, if you want. And again, folks online, just a quick update for you. We're still on activity 2. We'll be wrapping that here shortly. So hope that you're able to explore these tools or refine your use of them if you're already familiar. And we're going to be moving forward with activity 3 here in just a moment.
that, so sometimes it leads to working papers. But I think at the end of the day, I think you can select other different.
Natasha, I think we may have one question there in the middle, and then maybe one online. So again, we can't see up here online. We can't see the chat, but we're being informed that there may be a question. We'll get to that in just a moment. So Amit, we got a question here online. I'll read it if you want to. Hey, Amit. I was going to say from the walk, but that's all right. So we got a question online here. It says there is potential to use the Research Rabbit after having the systematic review database ready. Does the platform support a large database of external articles, for example, 200 or even 1,000?
So there isn't a limit on the number of papers per se. I think there are paid versions for each of these tools that have some additional features, but I don't think it's really based on the number of papers per se. So I think I would, if you are ready to sort of explore, I would ask you to maybe try out litmaps. I personally found litmaps to be a little more powerful, but the pro version is what probably gives you a little more advanced features for filtering by journal quality, time period, etc. And that way you have a little more control on what you're getting back. So I think what I've noticed is Research Rabbit is a little bit limited in terms of how it generates. Remember that these are all tools based off of papers that are published in the open domain or have at least archived by Semantic Scholar, which is basically 100+ million papers. It should have picked up. I'm not exactly sure what the search is and why it's not doing it, but I did try on a couple of these tools, and litmaps turned out to, in my opinion, to be a little better than Research Rabbit. The reason we selected Research Rabbit for today was it has a free version that is easily accessible. The litmaps free version is a little bit more limited. So later on, when you have time, I would definitely encourage you to try litmaps pro version. So it's great to see a lot of excitement in trying out these tools, which is exactly what we want from this workshop. So let's keep going. So now that we've sort of seen what literature mapping does, remember, just to recap, we started from a research question. Elicit gave you 5 to 10 papers. With a tool like LitMaps or Research Rabbit or Connected Papers, you're expanding that. And the next question then is, how do you scan or read the literature, right? So let me be very clear at the beginning. For us as researchers, there is no substitute for actually reading a paper that is very relevant to what you're doing end to end. That is super important because there are a lot of nuances, a lot of details that would be very important. But at the same time, you don't have to read hundreds or 200 papers because, as you saw from this exercise, you are generating a lot of information. You also need some way to actually weed this down so that you can then focus on papers that actually deserve your attention, that are super important to your question. And that's exactly what we mean by scanning or reading the literature. So there are a couple tools that are mentioned here. In the interest of time, I'm going to show you a video, and maybe we'll skip the activity, but we'll show you one way of how to do it on Notebook LM. And then I think that would be your homework for today, is to actually try this out as activity 3. So let's watch a quick video on a tool called SciSpace. So what SciSpace does is allows you to sort of look through a bunch of these papers, compare them on different aspects. So notice what we are doing. We are importing that library that we had from Connected Papers or other places. And then we are comparing these papers based on too long didn't read, or whether they have a data set, what kind of data set, what kind of findings they have, or maybe the methods used, and then maybe what are the contributions. So you can see that now, even before you actually get to reading the paper, you are able to compare them in a tabulated form, right? So this allows you to say, okay, maybe this paper is not of interest to me, but maybe this other paper is. And then you start bringing that number down to something manageable so that you can then spend the time to actually read the paper in detail. You can also chat with a paper, meaning you can pick a paper and say, I want to chat with it, I want to ask questions with it. And that's what this video is showing you, is like, given a paper, you can ask, what are the methods being used? And can you explain a little bit about this method? Because sometimes we have methods that we are not familiar with. And so it goes out and looks for more information on this. There is another tool that I'm showing you on the video called Etherbrain, which does something similar, chatting with the paper, but also summarizing different parts of it, like whether it's an introduction or maybe the methods. So you can actually summarize that pretty quickly using a tool like this. Again, remember, the goal here for one of these is to narrow down the papers, to select which ones are you going to spend the time on, so that you have that initial scanning done using an automated approach.
So, question in the back.
Yeah, sure.
About these literature reviews that we can make. Okay. These papers we are finding, I can see that some of them are quite recent, but they are also those, at least those I clicked on, journals I don't know. So these facilities, they don't reach the papers that are closed access in the best journals, do they?
So great question. So if I may repeat and summarize the question, and you can correct me, is some of the papers appear in journals that may not be as familiar, or some of them may not be the kinds of papers that you may be expected to see, but you're not seeing them. So I think that's something, like with any tools, right? So these tools are evolving. And what we are seeing is currently they are based on databases of papers like Semantic Scholar, which has about 200 or 300 million plus papers, which have abstracts, titles, and even in many cases open text available as well. So that's what it's based on right now. But it does mean that there are certain databases for journals that these tools are not covering. And so that's one of the caveats right now, or cautions. I was going to mention it. So what this question is a good lead into that is some of the journals in specific domains, for example, may not be covered into this right now. This may change 6 months from now. We don't know. This is an evolving tool, right? So for example, something when I tried like a year back, I got very different results from what I tried out more recently. So I think I wouldn't give up on the tool, but I would rather say, okay, maybe right now I'm getting these set of papers. Let me come back later on and see if there is an expanded search available or something like that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So, as for the scanning or reading the literature, I mean, there are various tools out there, right? So I just showed you SciSpace as one of them and Etherbrain. But there are other tools like Notebook-LM, Explain Paper, Scholarcy. So let me take a quick preview of the Notebook-LM. So Notebook-LM is a tool that is developed by Google, and it allows you to actually converse with different papers in a way that is more consumable. And just to give you a quick flavor, I've actually uploaded a few of my papers here. So these are 3 of the papers. And we are going to play, it creates a summary, and it's going to create a quick audio conversation between 2 people talking about these papers. So let's listen in.
Today we are going deep on crowdfunding. I mean, most of you probably already know the basics.
People online pitching their projects, hoping to drum up some cash from supporters.
Right, but what you might not know is that there are researchers out there studying this whole thing, especially the fraud part.
Exactly, and that's where it gets really interesting. We've got 3 research papers here covering a pretty wide time span, and it gives us a really cool, like, multi-layered look at crowdfunding. I mean, the potential, yeah, but also the pitfalls and even how the whole system reacts when fraud pops up.
Okay, let's get into it. So first up, we've got Coming It All from 2023. These guys did a deep dive specifically into Kickstarter, looking for projects that were flagged as, well, fraudulent. They went through media reports and, you know, tracking down all those Kickstarter campaigns that have been accused.
You get the idea. So they talk about these papers so that you can easily listen in. But there is also an interactive mode where you can actually come in and ask questions, right? So let's try if this works here.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the deep dive. Oh, hey there, how can we help?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the Wessel et al. Paper?
Oh, you mean the Wessel et al. Paper from 2016?
Yeah, the one about fake social information.
Absolutely, we can dive into that one a bit.
So the core of their research, it's all about how fake signals mess things up.
What do you mean by that?
You know, like those inflated backer numbers.
Oh yeah, go on.
What are the different methods between the Wessel et al. Paper and the Searing et al. Paper? How do they differ?
That's a great question. The Wessel et al. Paper, if you recall, focused on the impact of things like fake social media likes on how many people will back a project.
Right, those misleading signals of popularity.
Exactly. Their method involved looking at the number of backers a campaign gained each day and then seeing how that related to instances of fake Facebook likes.
So they were tracking the effects of these potentially fraudulent signals in real time.
Precisely. They used statistical models like negative binomial regression and probit models to analyze that relationship.
Okay, so more about the impact of potential fakery.
Yes, while the Searing et al. Paper from the same year
All right, you get the idea, right? So I think you can interact with these papers in a very conversational way. Just allows you to enjoy the process, but also really get into the mechanics of how to consume this information. So coming back to what we want to next think about is, here's your homework, right? So I think the activity 3, we are going to leave you as a homework. So take a picture of this. Or we can, of course, share these slides as well. But these are basically asking you to take 3 papers and enter them into SciSpace and then compare them on different aspects. You could do more than 5 papers, 3 papers, but you can start with these. You can also do the notebook LM exercise that I did, where you can upload these PDFs and then converse with them. I'll give you 10 seconds to take a picture or something, and if you like, you can use this as a homework. So moving on, so we touched on 3 important aspects of research: semantic literature search, literature mapping, and scanning. Now there are some potentials for data analysis and writing editing. But I want to caution this, because I think we, as researchers, we come in from all different angles. Some are quantitative researchers, some are qualitative. So we use a lot of different methods. And so this is an evolving field where I don't think there is a one tool that allows you to sort of do everything at this point. I've seen ChatGPT work for something that involves coding, or Julius AI that involves some statistical analysis. So we won't delve into this today, but I think I just want to leave you at least with the idea that this is an evolving space as far as data analysis goes. And then here's a screenshot of Julius.ai if you want to explore this later. Now, when it comes to writing and editing, this is probably the most controversial aspect, right? While the capability is right there in terms of what it can do, you have to be cautious about how you use it, because ultimately it's your story, it's your research, and how you want to communicate that to the broader field is what matters. And so I think what you want to do with these tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, or others is want to work on a scaffolding mechanism where you create an outline, use that to expand on different parts, maybe an intro, maybe a literature review. Also, you can use these tools to get feedback. You can say, okay, here's my draft. How can you provide me more feedback on some of the strengths and weaknesses of this draft compared to maybe another paper that you uploaded? Or you can provide it a rubric. Or you can ask it for actionable improvement. So use it as a peer review. It can provide you a peer review before you actually even get to a peer review stage. And then you can also ask it to score. You can ask it to score your draft by providing certain criteria, like whether it is rigorous, relevant, clarity, specificity, you name it. So another interesting piece or angle to do is what is called as an audio and visual paper writing, meaning let's say you're driving, you're simply, idea comes to you. Before you even get to office, you can simply record this idea on your phone and then use this on Notebook LM. Use the recording on Notebook LM or something similar to get a text draft of what your idea is. This could be a cool way to actually start out new projects, new ideas. Same thing with video. So like you could take a picture of your figure or a framework, ask it to write a quick description about it. This could be your first draft around a figure or table. So again, use them creatively, but not obviously writing the paper for you, but in a way that it scaffolds and allows you to speed up things for you. So those are sort of the main, the components of research. Let's transition a little bit into the teaching aspect. And here's a QR code for you to get the resources that we just talked about today. We'll bring it up later on again as well. So the QR code will show up later on as well. But I'll pass it on to Zach to help us guide through some of the teaching aspects.
Yeah, thank you, Amit. And I will just say that, when we think about this transition that we're literally making on this panel, but then that we all have to make as well, from researching into teaching, I think that's a really important transition that we need to realize how closely connected these two things really are, teaching and research. Because I think too often we do put these in separate buckets, at least in the United States. We have percentage of our teaching load, our faculty load that is toward research and then toward teaching, and we kind of compartmentalize our lives in those ways. But the reality is these are two interconnected processes, right? When we think about why we do research, one, to advance the knowledge and pursuit of knowledge so that we can improve the world around us and improve for us in our institutions, to improve the businesses and the workflow of business in the United States. But really, we're doing it so that we can teach as well, so that we can teach others what we're learning, because knowledge simply for the sake of knowledge doesn't have an incredible amount of value. We're researching these things so that we can share the knowledge and findings both with our peers and fellow researchers and journals and articles, but also with our students. And that's something that we need to keep that relationship at the forefront of our mind as we move forward here in transitioning into AI and teaching. And so I want to start with this, and there's a reason why I'm showing it to you, and it's something I hope that resonates with you as much as it resonates with me. This is not a real graph, by the way. It's not based on any real data. It is an illustration, but I think it does illustrate exactly why this is such an important topic right now. Many people that I talk to, both inside and outside of academia, think about the current capabilities of artificial intelligence in various ways. If you were with us on Friday, we spent some time, just a few minutes, talking about perception versus reality and how important it is to kind of to reconcile those two things, because we sometimes we perceive things in ways that aren't necessarily aligned with how others do, and that shared perception is where reality ultimately is formed. But I think a lot of folks, including those that we work with in the United States, but also those who we've come in contact with throughout our travels and our conversations, view AI in a way similar to this, right? Which is, hey, it's doing some interesting tricks, it's doing some funny monkey tricks, but it's not yet where we are, right? And I'll also draw your attention to the fact that this delineation between Einstein level intelligence, the peak of humanity's intelligence, versus the lesser than population in terms of intelligence. There's a big gap somehow between those two. What I think is more likely the case, and this is again not my graphic, but one that we've borrowed and adapted from others before, is that AI is doing some things right now where we're kind of more so the stick figure on the right-hand side of the graph. What in the world is happening? We're trying to figure out how did it already eclipse some of the things that we thought we did better. And I'll have some real data to show you on this in just a moment. And I think what we also need to realize is that difference in humanity, right? See how really that's shrunk, because that is something that I think we are too guilty of sometimes, and not realizing how closely related we all are as individuals, whether it be by discipline, whether it be by academia or not. And so I think this is really what we're looking at right now in a lot of ways, right? That we thought we had more time, many of us. We thought, particularly in the teaching world, that we would always be the foremost experts, that students would always come to us in higher education. And I have many thoughts on that. We'll get into them shortly. But I think the reality is there's many things that right now, as you just saw, AI is doing better than what we can as individuals, at least by ourselves. And so we need to complement ourselves with AI, both in the research world, but also in the teaching that we do every day. So with that being said, some real data to back this up. My colleagues and I were having a fascinating conversation yesterday about the credibility that we as academics have inherited. And I use that word inherited because it's not necessarily credibility that we've earned, although we have degrees and we have papers and we have things that speak to our accomplishments. Any faculty member who walks into a university class, whether it be here in Portugal or in the United States or really anywhere in the world, when a faculty member walks to the front of a classroom and he or she starts to talk or open up their PowerPoint slides, something really interesting happens. And it happened even here this morning, where people sit down, people start taking notes, people start listening, and there's just an implied credibility that is given to a faculty member, to a teacher, to that process of teaching and learning. And it's one that we should all be very thankful for, whether we are on the student side, whether we're on the faculty side, whether we're in the administrative side. It is something that is really at the heart of academia, right? Which is students come to trust us, that we know what we're talking about. And it's because of that research that we've talked, that we've shared a lot about this morning, but it's also because there is an inherent credibility that comes with being in the university system. And the reason I bring that up is because this graph right here illustrates the fact that if our credibility is predicated on our knowledge, again, AI is surpassing us. And I want that to really linger for a moment. AI is surpassing us. And I say this to people, and I get met with all kinds of reactions. And it's not to say that, you know, this is a doomsday worst case. I'll tell you more about where I find myself on the spectrum most days of skepticism to optimism in just a moment. But it is surpassing us in its ability to recall information, certainly. I don't know about you, but as I get older, my memory is fading. AI is not, right? It's getting better. We're going in opposite directions on that regard. It's better at synthesizing information. We just watched and thought about and talked about all the ways it can pull together articles where if those tools didn't exist, many of you have done that process for years, how long would that have taken you? We gave you 10 minutes to use AI. Think about that. Most of us, it would have taken months, right, to go through, find all those articles on our own, pull all those things together, connect them in ways that make sense and that are meaningful. So it's important we realize both the efficiency side of things, but also that credibility side of things. Because students have come to us and have trusted us for years, decades, centuries, really, going all the way back to the beginnings of higher education. But they're now getting to that point where they're doing the same with AI. Most students that I talk to trust AI as similarly as they would their faculty members. The three of us, in a lot of ways. Now, there's things that we're still skeptical of, and I think that healthy skepticism, as we said, is important. But most of us trust AI as well. I'll give you a quick example. I found myself at the wrong train station in Lisbon the other day because I don't speak Portuguese, and I thought I did. Instead, I just uploaded it to ChatGPT, and I translated it into English, and I found myself at the right train station. And I trusted it. I trusted AI to get me to where I needed to go, and sure enough, it was right, and I was wrong, right? Because it can speak Portuguese much better than I can, and it can translate much better than I can. And so when we think about these things, the trust component is such an integral part of the teaching and learning. If I don't trust you as my faculty member, I'm not likely to learn from you. Even if what you're telling me is true, valid, useful, helpful, if I'm questioning the source, right? This goes all the way back to the days of Socrates, right? If I'm questioning the source of who it is that's sharing this information with me, then I'm unlikely to learn from it, regardless of whether the information itself was valid or not. And so it's important that we realize that, again, PhD level questions, AI is beginning, and you can see the trend. It's going up. This last data point was captured in October of 2024, around the time where we gave the initial version of this presentation. It's only gone up since then. If you have experimented with the paid models of ChatGPT and the deep research, it's gotten even higher than what you see on this screen right now. And it's hard to keep up with, but I can tell you that trend is continuing upward. It's not plateauing. It's not going down. And so we need to come to terms with this in terms of understanding how it's affecting our teaching and learning. And then we need to understand where this is going. And so these are some more benchmark data with how it's performed in both graduate level science courses. We'll get into some of the creative or the arts and sciences as well here in a moment. But you can see the data can be overwhelming sometimes. And if that was on it in and of itself, that's one thing. But our students realize this now. Our undergraduate students, our graduate students, and even ourselves, we realize this, and that's also shown in the data. So this was, again, from October of 2024. These numbers have only gone up as well. We did a quick poll for those who were in the room on Friday to see how many were using AI. I think I counted 100%. At least there was 100% people who kind of indicated that not everybody was throwing their hands up proudly, but this number has gotten certainly closer to 100% than even where it was back in the fall of this past year. You can see what they're using it for, which I think is really interesting, but you can also see their beliefs. And I want to draw your attention to this one on the right-hand side here of the screen, that they believe that AI increases cheating. Okay, so by the way, if you can't see this fine print, this is based on almost 10,000 students. The study originated out of Australia, but they actually had multiple countries within that sample. 80 or 70+% think that this increases cheating. And yet they're still doing it anyways. So what does that mean, right? I don't think it means that our students are necessarily worse or bad people. I think that means they understand the fact that they can get really credible information and insight. And that's what they're here to get, right? That's why they come to a university. That's why they come to learn, is to get the best information that they can apply and use in their life. And AI is now getting to that point where we as professors and as faculty members are not in direct competition. I don't think that we're in competition with AI, but I do think we must harness the power of AI if we are to survive as a profession, as an industry, as an entity that is academia. So, with that all being said, are students given enough guidance about AI? And the short answer is absolutely not. The universities that we work at, we're playing catch up for many years and still are in a lot of ways with policing and creating policies. Natasha's going to talk about that in just a moment. But none of us, I don't think, have the instructional manual. That's what we talked about earlier this morning. It's what we talked about on Friday. And so that's why conversations like this are so incredibly important, so that we can have some sense of how we navigate this, and then we can share that navigation with our students, because our students are looking for this information. They want guidance. They don't want to feel like they're cheating. They don't want to feel like they're doing something wrong, but yet they know there's value in what AI has to offer. So we, as faculty, as leaders in higher education, we have the responsibility to provide that structure and that guidance. So, Amit talked about the stages that we went through in higher education, and that was certainly true for research. It's even more true, in my opinion, for the classroom and for teaching. And you think back to those earliest days of AI, all the conversation was about, one, banning it, right? Once we got past banning it, and kind of at the same time, we were talking about detecting it. How do we identify? And it almost felt like this big witch hunt, right? We had to go find all the people using AI, and we had to stop them. And we quickly realized, including the three of us, and I suspect most of you, quickly realized this is a fool's errand, right? This is not going to get us where we need to be. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can try to put things in your class that forbid or ban or all these strong words that some of us have used ourselves, if we're being honest, in our syllabi, our emails, or wherever else, and yet we're not going back. Right? We can't go back. It's not something that we can really even entertain. And so the detection process, while there's lots of resources out there, and there are some that still continue to pursue that, I know I speak on behalf of my colleagues, that is not something where we should invest a lot of our time, because our time is limited and precious, and that is not a path that's going to lead to a lot of fruitful results. And so there's articles still written about this. There are people still trying to detect this. We'll get into the pedagogy in just a moment, because that does still come up from time to time. But simply seeking to detect when we should be seeking to integrate seems to be the conflict that still some faculty and some universities and some institutions are still dealing with. I draw your attention to this example that I just put in the middle of the screen, though, because this is the real concern, in my opinion, from an academic point of view. We're never 100% sure on this, ever, right? Even when we think we know, one, what is 100% in the world of AI? Because did they use it for an outline? Maybe. Does that constitute as plagiarism, or in the traditional academic dishonesty ways that we think about academic dishonesty? I would argue no. I mean, we just talked about, that's something that we use it for, is to outline our research papers. And so now we're going to forbid our students from doing something similar. We also talk about, is it your work or the AI's work? And I think that's an important conversation that we continue to have, because originality is an important part of humanity, right? That we're creating, that we're expressing, we're identifying things that are new. But I draw your attention to this because there's been a lot, at least in the United States, a lot of issues with false positives. I deal with this probably once a week. It's honestly that rampant, where a faculty member swears a student is using AI in an unauthorized way. And the conversation I inevitably have to have with said faculty member is, okay, do you know this for sure? And how do you know this for sure? And what evidence do you have? Because much like if you were to conduct a legal case, you can't just throw out accusations against people without having some real solid understanding of the subject matter. And in the States, again, this is one example. There's many more where we have faculty, not we and the three of us, but faculty in general have accused students of plagiarizing or cheating. And there's been falsehoods to that. And students have ways of themselves proving that they did not do that. And it creates just a ripple effect of problems that none of us really want to deal with. So what do we do? How do we move from detection to adoption? I think it's important that we recognize that adoption is not a uniformed approach, right? So we all know that there's different ways of adopting any type of technology. You can be all in, you lean into it 100%. Everything we do is done with AI. I would argue we're not quite there yet, and I'm not sure that we should ever be fully 100% adopting AI for every function, every skill, every learning objective. I still think there's value in that technology distant objectives. We're probably going to get more into that in a moment. But if we're not uniformed, and I don't think we ever will be, universities are going to have their own policies and they're going to have differences among those policies, then we have to communicate. Right? So if your policy is different than our policy, and even within our policies, we have 3 differences among our institutions, and even within those institutions, we have different colleges, and those colleges have differences in how they use AI, and then within those colleges, we have different classes. Well, now you can see why students don't feel like they have enough guidance. Right? Now that makes sense when we go back and look at those data, that they don't know what to do. They don't know how to process this. They don't know how to make sense of all the changes that are happening. And so I encourage you, this one again will be posted with the rest of our materials, but for those of you scanning QR codes, this one right here will take you to a link. As of last checked, over 600 syllabi posted in this Google Doc alone that you can get access to just by scanning this, or again, after the fact, if you want to just download these files, you'll get access to it in that way. 600 syllabi policies that have been curated around AI. Some of them leaning from, again, all in, full adoption, here's how we're going to use it in everything that we do. Many others from the absolutely, we're banning this entirely, so 0 to 100%. And then there's a lot of in between, which is where I argue we should probably be at this stage, right? We should still be somewhere in between of, we're not 0%, we can't ban it from our classes altogether, but we need to provide guidance for our students if they are to successfully leverage these technologies in our classroom in a way that aligns with our objectives, our learning goals, the things that we set for our students. And I think Natasha is going to talk a little bit more about that, particularly at a more macro level, and how institutions, colleges, programs can continue to think about how we police and put structure around these types of conversations. So Natasha?
I think as faculty, we want to know what are the policies of the university. And I think that's what I heard on Friday when you guys shared that you don't have a policy that comes from the university. And I would say that that was very much true at my university as well. In fact, purposefully, administration did not want to dictate anything to the faculty. They wanted this to be a faculty-driven process, and they've given it to a faculty committee. At the same time, faculty wanted some guidance. Right? So when ChatGPT first came about at the end of the semester of the fall semester of 2022, for the spring semester of 2023, it was sort of an anything goes. We were learning as fast as the students were learning, and I think some of the detection tools came about at the same time. But definitely for the fall semester of 2023, my faculty were reaching out to me as an administrator and saying, where is our policy? I want to see a policy. I want to put something in the syllabus. And the university approach was, we don't have a policy, general policy on academic integrity applies, and we think that should work. But we learned very quickly that does not work in every single case. And then we also were leaning on the faculty to come up with those policies because it differs between the disciplines. And I think many schools did the same thing. So what I'm sharing here is something that the American Association of Colleges and Universities has endorsed. So you can see that AAC&U, and it actually came out of the Elon University from one of our colleagues who could not join us for this presentation, but presented with us at an earlier conference. She was part of this approach at Elon University, but this guide is available and I guess again endorsed by the American Association of Colleges and Universities, and I put a QR code as well as the link. We have adopted this at the University of Tampa just to give some guidance to the students and to emphasize that the policies will differ from class to class to class, and they have to be listening to what their professor is saying in that particular class. But also we have a separate guidelines for faculty. And the guidelines, those guidelines are organized around the different subjects, whether these are math-related classes or writing-related classes, because policies will differ. But I think the general trend is for faculty to embrace what's going on. Right? And I think some of the questions that came up last time, and I really appreciate those questions, we have to focus on the ethical and responsible use of AI. Right? As instructors, we have responsibility to teach our students that they have to be responsible. They have to disclose. And just like we teach them how to put together a bibliography, how to cite correctly, we have to teach them how do you use generative AI, how do you cite the use of generative AI correctly, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Similar to what the guidelines are coming out with the research, right? Because faculty want to know what's acceptable. Is this acceptable to use it just for editing, or can we do a literature search with tools like this? And so I think those things are very important. And I wanted to share those resources.
So, as we think about because I completely agree with Natasha, and I think this is something that we're at I said this on Friday, for the students, and I meant this, this is the best time, in my opinion, to be a student, because the ability to acquire information and to obtain it in ways that many of us, particularly those of us who are a little bit older, who maybe have passed the days of being at least an undergrad or graduate student, we're envious of, right? Because there are so many opportunities. And so how do we start? If you're on that spectrum that I mentioned of 0 to 100, and if you're closer to the 0 side, how do you gradually move your way down to a point that is better aligned with the students of today? I would argue there's a couple of approaches to consider. From a foundational point of view, a lot of our students at the undergraduate level in particular are using Google Learnabout. And if you've never used that tool or that particular version of Google, I encourage you to check that one out. I would argue, this is one person's perspective on this, that it can put together a lesson plan and a structure to learning about just about any topic that you're interested in. And if you don't believe me, try it, okay? And if you have tried it, you probably know that that is accurate then, because anything that you are curious to learn more about, this is a starting point for you. I did quite a bit of Portuguese culture in preparation for coming here. Google Learnabout helped me get a starting ground there and let me know some of the key things that I want to consider before making my way to Portugal for the first time. And it was very helpful in doing that. One of the things to keep in mind is that that is, again, the bedrock of what we've been doing in higher education for forever, right? In a lot of ways. This goes back to Bloom's taxonomy. This goes back to a lot of the foundational ways in which we were taught to teach, and a lot of the ways that we've learned to understand new material is to have that foundational cornerstone of knowledge, information acquisition, recall. That doesn't necessarily create new knowledge. That's not the research process. That goes higher up the pyramid. But most of us would argue, and I still believe personally, that it is a prerequisite, because how do you advance new knowledge if you don't know, again, what's already been done or what's already been learned, and how do we grow on that existing information? So Google Learnabout's a great starting point for students and for faculty who are hesitant about incorporating AI into their courses. That being said, as we think about moving further up the Bloom's taxonomy, we know that it's not just enough to take in information, right? We have to be able to use it in ways. We have to be able to interact with it. We have to be able to understand it in its complexities and in its context. And I go back to the example, and we won't play this one just because we've already heard from the interactive part of Notebook LM. There's a lot of ways to incorporate this into your classroom, right? Into your actual pedagogy. And I think about this very complementary. So there may be things that I just don't have the time in a traditional semester to go deep diving into. But now I can put together a list of resources that help complement the lack of time I have in a class so that students can have that information. Hey, if you're more interested in how this relates to this particular industry that's very unique and very niche, then here's a way that I've put some resources for you. Again, that's not something that I would have been able to do from an efficiency standpoint even 6 to 9 months ago. Now I have the ability to provide that to my students in a way that's really interactive and that they can ask questions, just like we experimented with ourselves just a few minutes ago. So beyond interacting, the thing I really think is part of the future of higher education, and I mentioned this as well briefly on Friday, AI in particular, I think, offers an incredible opportunity to scale the personalized interaction we have with every single student. And at least in the United States, and I suspect globally as well, we have had a very difficult time personalizing education because of some of the economic structure that surrounds the United States model of education. And my colleagues and I have been reflecting on this quite a bit while we've been over here. You know, when we have 200 plus students at times in our classrooms, how do you personalize that? It's very difficult, right? When you have, I got an hour and 15 minutes for my class, but I've got 200 students. What do you do, right? How do you make that relevant to every single individual in your room? I would argue it's impossible to do that in the traditional constraints that we've been operating in higher education. But I would argue it's now possible with a GPTs with the paid account models, with my materials, with my lecture notes, with my videos, with my thoughts, my insights, so that it can be my extension, right? When I'm not able to tailor or tutor everything that I do to the individual, it can now help me to do that. And a lot of it is about training your model. We hear a lot about how the models are trained. This can be done by individuals now. It's not just large corporations who can train these models. With some very basic tools, such as a paid version of ChatGPT, you can go out and build your own model that basically is tailored to your needs and your desires and your interest as a professor or an academic or a student. And so while you're, again, moving to that point or thinking about that point, I'll share with you, you can put a lot of guardrails on this as well. Because my colleagues are always, well, they're just going to use it to cheat. I say, I don't allow my models, the ones that I train, it won't give them answers. I very much tell them, do not answer these things for them, and it follows my commands, right? It listens to what I have trained it to do. And so if you're skeptical or hesitant at all about this, know that you can put a lot of those parameters on it for yourself, okay? So for the next few minutes, what I'd like you to do, upload some material that you have, whether, again, be your own as a faculty member or material that you've recently been exposed to as a student or that you've been engaging with. And I would like you to prompt it with this particular prompt. I am looking for a tutor. I would like you to help me understand this subject better. And then once you do that, you can start to fill in the gaps with your details. And I'd like you to see just the tutoring capabilities alone, why somebody like the Khan Academy is investing millions and billions, now we're getting into that point, of dollars into training these tutoring models, and how effective that can be as a complement to the current pedagogy that we have in higher education. So I'm going to give you about a minute or two to kind of get started on that, and then I'll walk around. I think my colleagues may join me as well. We'll see how you might want to use ChatGPT as a tutor. And if you have another preferred tool that you'd rather use instead of GPT or ChatGPT, there's others certainly out there that are capable of performing this task as well. This just tends to be one of the more accessible ones that we all have readily available, and now as well available in our iPhones and other places that are integrated into our day-to-day lives. So we'll give you a few minutes to start on that, and then we'll answer any questions that you have. We are watching the time, though, as well, to make sure that we end on the time that we were scheduled to end, so we'll only give you a few minutes for this.
Can you remind them the prompt exactly what they should do? Can you remind them the prompt?
Yeah. So just to clarify the reminder, and then we'll answer, there's a question in the back. Reminder of your prompt. So you're going to want to specify that you are looking for a tutor, right? So you're looking to tutor, or you're looking to build a tutor. You can kind of play with the verbs a little bit, but you want to specify that the tutoring word is included in your prompt, because that's going to trigger some steps and some actions by the model then that it would not otherwise consider. And I think we have a question in the back as well. Do you want to go ahead?
I don't know how to start. Do we have to go insert one of the shots to be the "Let me help you"?
Sure. Yeah. So if you go to ChatGPT on the bottom here.
Widget?
Yeah. So on the bottom in your input model there, if you just start by typing in there message, let me help you there, you can go in and we'll actually come up and guide you on that as well.
Okay.
So we're going to give you a few minutes for that. We'll walk around and help. But again, your goal for the next few minutes is to explore the development of a tutor. So there's a couple of really good questions that have come up so far, at least here in the room, so I'll share them, especially for the folks online as well. It appears for some that uploading the attachments might be difficult for the free version of ChatGPT, so that's something to be mindful of. You can still do a workaround there by inserting things as text upload, but it appears as ChatGPT gets further and further along and their business model, really does embrace the paid subscriptions, they're going to continue to restrict to a degree what you can do with the free version. So you're going to be, you can still interact with it, you can still build, and we saw one up here in the front row where you can still train. But the question about how do I share it with my students is a really good one, because that will require a paid model. So if you have a paid subscription to ChatGPT, then you can share what you build with really anyone. And that version can be accessed for free. So what you share can be accessed by your students for free. But you yourself, as the builder of that model, would need a paid subscription. And then we had another great question or point about Google Learn About. I did not know that I guess it is unavailable in Portugal, at least for those of you who are traditionally accessing. If you have a VPN or some other way of working around that restriction, that might be an option. But Google Learn About may not be, particularly for those of you here in the room, here locally as well, that may not be an accessible tool for you at this point in time. So those are some thoughts. I know it's we're running up to the end of our session, and I realize that opportunity to build a tutor may be just at the early steps, but I can tell you in a closing remark for this particular activity that this is one of the most promising ways, in my opinion, that AI can implement or can affect the future of higher education. I don't see a scenario, and we, gentlemen and I were talking about this before the start of the session. I don't see a scenario where AI fully replaces faculty, ever. Because if you think about, and I challenge you to think about this over the coming days, if you think about coming into a class much like this and just sitting down and you've got your AI faculty member up on the screen, most of us aren't engaging with that faculty member, right? Most of us aren't really listening to that faculty member. And you ask yourself why. Well, it's because we've been very much wired from our beginnings to learn from each other, right, as individuals, as humans. And so there is something unique about the fact that your faculty members are people and that they're individuals and that they have their own lives and their own stories. And we connect to that on ways that we don't probably think about enough in higher education. But there's a reason why, as I said on Friday, we haven't just eclipsed the ultimate intelligence even since the dawn of the internet, when we have every piece of information, generally speaking, accessible via the internet and other tools. It's because we learn from each other. More than we learn from technology, more than we learn from downloading things. We're not storage units, right? We can't just simply download massive amounts of information and then retain it. We have to connect it. We have to make those applications in our lives, and it's the other humans who have lived and who have experienced things who can help us apply those things that I think really make that possible. So we are going to move forward just to wrap things up. We have more resources, and again, some of these you've already been given access to, so you don't have to necessarily do so right now, but again, they'll be shared in the final version of the slides that are posted as well. I'll leave you with this, and then I'll turn it to my colleagues for any final thoughts that they have, because I think this is where we're all, in one way or another, thinking is what is the future, right? Because I know if you're anything like me, most days I just don't know, right? Most days I'm humble enough to admit I don't know exactly where we end up, in part because the rate of change has been so rapid in these last few years that it makes it very difficult to even forecast. The trajectory we're on now, sure, we can do forecasting and predictions and estimates, but if we continue at the accelerated rate that we are at with ChatGPT and AI, or not ChatGPT specific, but AI in general, then I think we could very well have to reevaluate those predictions a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. And so anybody who stands in front of you and says they know exactly where this thing ends, I would encourage you to take that same degree of skepticism that Amit was mentioning earlier about why we need to be skeptical on the outputs of AI. But I draw your attention to this quote because this one keeps me up at night and keeps me thinking both positively and negatively about the future of academia. It says, given the starkly differing perspectives on future progress in AI, it would be unwise to put all eggs in one basket and formulate economic plans for any given scenario or single scenario. I've seen some estimates, predictions, forecasts of those who are on the skeptical side that say this will be our ultimate economic demise, particularly for the knowledge economy, those who are, and including academia in that. There's some who believe that and who have forecasts that go in that direction. There are many others who say this is the greatest and most transformative thing that has happened to higher education in the history of higher education. Those are on the positive side. I encourage you, I try to live it myself, to be somewhere in the middle, to have a foot in both domains, to be both optimistic and skeptical, because there are reasons to be both. There are reasons to suggest that we have a very bright future by leveraging the power of AI. I was telling my colleagues the other day, I've seen some really interesting research coming out of healthcare right now, that it is possible in our lifetime that we cure cancer with AI. How incredible, right? Something that many of us, people especially who have lost family members or loved ones to cancer too soon, we would love a world where that's possible, right? I've also seen the same kind of articles written about this will be the end of humanity. And again, I think those extremes are, you have to be careful living in those areas. But if you find yourself somewhere in the middle where you're optimistic and skeptical at the same time, I think you can harness the power of AI, and I think it's something that we could all do better of going forward. And so this is something that, again, I think needs to continue to be discussed. We need to think about the future of AI. There's articles written all over about it. But when we think about the ways that we have typically viewed humanity, we have viewed our success as academics, I think we cannot ignore, and certainly those of you who are here in this room and those of you who are online are not ignoring, but there are still many of our peers who aren't in these conversations, who don't attend these sessions, who don't think this is something that we need to really concern ourselves with. Those are the individuals we all need to collectively work with and communicate with to help them understand the impact that AI is having in higher education. So with that being said, I want to turn it back to my colleagues for a closing word on their part, but before I do, I want to simply thank you once again for the incredibly warm hospitality, engagement, and just a really remarkable couple of days that we have been able to experience here in Portugal, and we're really looking forward to staying connected with you in your journey, personally and professionally, with AI. And so we've provided our information. If you would like to stay connected with us, we invite that, but I'll turn it back to my colleagues for some closing thoughts that they may have on this as well.
Thank you, Zach. I would echo Zach's point about thanking you. I mean, we are incredibly grateful for being here and sharing some ideas with you. Hopefully they were helpful. And we are all learning from each other when it comes to these tools, right? Whether it's research or teaching. There are various use cases that we talked about today, many which we didn't, but that's the part of experimenting. So if there is one thing I would leave you with is experiment with these tools. Hopefully you will find ways that you can use these creatively that you haven't seen before, and that's your aha moment. And that's one of the ways we all advance and share it with others, and that's how we'll all advance together.
Yeah. And I think involve your students, work with them, encourage them to experiment with the tools, bring it into your curriculum, into your classroom through different activities. And I think it's a responsibility is on us to make sure that we have the potential that's bright in the future gets even brighter. And thank you for having us here.